introduction, and we want to honor her time. Keith, you'll kindly admit people, and then maybe you can make sure they're muted as they join. Yeah, so nice to see you, Joylynn. Nice to see you again. Sorry, I think my light is on the opposite direction. I should have my face lit, but I think this is not the first time we're meeting. And just want to welcome you to the Cyber Shujaa group, the cohort that we're having. This is the first group we're taking through this year. We started in January and we're just now finishing. And we have, I think we've also invited the previous cohort, those who want to have a rerun and want to revisit this topic, because I know you gave us a similar talk last year, towards the end of last year. So I can see a few names that I recognize from the previous cohorts. So welcome everyone. So Joylynn is going to take us through a session on DevSecOps from now till about 11. And Joylynn is a senior cloud security advocate at Microsoft. I think everyone who just thinks of DevOps thinks of Joylynn. So thank you for honoring our invitation, Joylynn, and you've been a great support to the Cyber Shujaa program. Our commitment is to get all these people on this call jobs, and we're targeting 2,000 youth in the next 3 years, jobs within the cybersecurity space. So thank you so much for pouring into them. And yeah, so we look forward to hearing from you, and karibu sana. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Okay. And thank you all for joining us today. As Dr. Msuva said, my name is Joylynn Kirui. I'm a senior cloud security advocate. Microsoft is what we are going to do today, is DevSecOps. So I go around, like even in events, in workshops, talking to developers and users in general about DevSecOps. So you might be wondering what DevSecOps is all about. So we'll cover that as we go along as well. And so the schedule of today will be the first hour. We'll go through a bit of theory, and I'll take you through the practical myself. And then for the second hour, you will be doing sort of like a workshop. I'll give you all the instructions on what you need to do. And then if you have any challenge, you can let me know through the Teams chat, or you can just unmute and we can talk through it as well. Because what I learned is that you get to adopt or learn more through doing. So I hope we will all stay in the session for the next 2 hours. And please participate. This is your session. Learn as much as possible, and we'll start from there as well. Okay. So we'll start with a bit of statistics. So the reason why we have to talk a lot about DevSecOps is because we are seeing a lot of exploits, and a lot of companies are still not yet adopting DevSecOps to the level that it's supposed to be taken to. Like, it's not being taken as seriously as it should be, because you're seeing like 52% of companies are still sacrificing cybersecurity for speed. So what this happens is you'll find a scenario whereby you're working with the development team and the business is pushing towards having a particular feature pushed to production within a particular period of time. So what happens is, like, if you find a critical or high security vulnerability just before you actually push that deadline, most businesses say that you sacrifice cybersecurity for speed. So even if you found high or critical cybersecurity vulnerabilities, they'll still push it to production. So you still find, yes, 57% of operations team push back on security best practices. Why is this? Because it actually even takes like a lot of time to actually go back and fix those security vulnerabilities if they are found later on, like during the operations side. We'll cover more about that even when we're going along. So we also found that 44% of developers are actually not trained to code securely. So everywhere I go, like when I'm talking about developers, they're like, security is actually not their job. They push back a lot. And they're like, yes, they build a particular minimum viable product and then they push it to the security team. The security team tests that product for security vulnerabilities, and then they give like 2 pages or even 5-page security vulnerabilities back to the developers. So there's usually a lot of back and forth between the developer and the security team to fix those security vulnerabilities that are actually found. And what are these security vulnerabilities that we're talking about? So you find that in a particular system that you're deploying, majority of the code that's actually part of that application is open source or third-party components. So 80 to 90% of the code is borrowed code. So you can imagine if you don't pay attention of what code you're borrowing into your application, you're actually inviting security vulnerabilities into your environment. So we'll cover a lot of that as well, of how you can be able to secure your code, your borrowed code, and how you can be able to make sure that they remain secure as well. So apart from the open source code, other sources of vulnerabilities that you've seen is particularly unchecked dependencies. So unchecked dependencies is just around the 80 to 90% open source or third-party components. And a main one is employee error. So you'll find that because of speed, they want to deploy a particular feature or a particular application very fast. They end up exposing access tokens, code patterns, APIs in their code. And they also end up not deploying best practices in their code because of speed as well. So, and then we'll find that actually the reality of the ground right now is that we have a lot more developers than security researchers. So if a developer pushes like a particular, like they're working on one particular system that has like maybe 10,000 lines of code, and then a security researcher has like maybe 10 projects. So you'll find that the ratio between developers and security researchers is very low. So like you can't work one-to-one in such a way that you can be able to test everything end to end. And for sure, the damage is usually exponentially greater if it reaches production. So you'll see, according to the level of business that is being run or the organization, what we've seen in the past that if the breach happens in production, it's usually like a lot more costly to fix that security vulnerability. So when we talk about DevSecOps, we're talking about shifting security left. And the whole aspect of DevSecOps is automating security or integrating security throughout the software development lifecycle. So the software development lifecycle includes also all the way from requirement gathering. You need to have security requirements incorporated all the way from requirements when you're having your architecture drawing. You need to have security folks there, so at least they can be able to help you put in security requirements early on as possible. So this is why it's very important for us to shift security left, because you have 80% of security incidents reduced when you identify them during the development rather than in production. And the cost of actually fixing these security vulnerabilities in production is 60 times more than fixing it during the whole process of the software development lifecycle. And as I said earlier, like 62% of enterprises actually do not target security during the development phase. And this is why we want to push more and more adoption of DevSecOps principle in developers, in organizations, in everyone that's actually building code. But do not confuse this to say that DevSecOps is all about automation. The main principle of DevSecOps is culture shift. We all want to have a security first mindset. So when a developer is going in to build the code, they're thinking about security throughout. So at least we don't have that blame game between the security team and the developers, and also the business and the security team, saying that a particular vulnerability was actually exploited, and the company has actually lost a lot of money. So we want to all work together. So at least we have like blameless way of working, and we have a security first mindset. So this is how security fits into the development lifecycle. So we have, this is just a general overview of the software development lifecycle. We have the pre-commit, then we go to the commit, and then we go to deploy, and then we go to operate and monitor. So during the pre-commit, when we are going into to discover like, okay, so what are we supposed to work on? We have to think of threat modeling first. So threat modeling, hopefully we'll have like another session to cover the Microsoft threat modeling tool. So threat modeling by you try and identify what vectors can be used by attackers to attack your application or your system. So at least you think back on so what vectors can be used and how you can be able to secure them. So if you're going to use APIs, so how can you secure your API endpoint? How can you make sure that the traffic is actually encrypted? How can you make sure that the database is actually storing maybe sensitive data or that's maybe not accessible and it's actually hashed? So we also look at pre-commit hooks. So pre-commit hooks is whereby like before I commit my code, if I have hard coded credentials, it will prevent me from committing my code because it has identified that I have hard coded credentials. So I have to fix that code before I commit it. And then you also have to have secure coding standards because we mentioned that developers actually don't think about security when building, and you have to have a security first mindset. In order for them to have a security first mindset, you have to have a secure coding standard for them to work with. Another thing is peer review. So peer review is whereby you're working with another person to review what you're actually building. So at least they can maybe identify maybe something that you've overlooked. And then when you come to the commit, this is where we actually now start automating the security tools. So here we have the static application security testing, SAST. So we're going to cover most of these tools in our practical as well. So SAST crawl through your code and find security vulnerabilities in the code that you've actually built. So SAST actually checks the code that you actually own. And then here we actually look at security unit tests if your code actually passes the security checks. And then we also look at dependency management or what we call software composition analysis. So dependency management and software composition analysis is the third-party components or open source components that you've actually borrowed. So this is the code that you've borrowed in. Remember the 80 or 90% code that you've borrowed in. So this is where we actually deploy code to see if it's actually vulnerable. And also during the commit, we do credential scanning to see if you have embedded hard-coded credentials or public tokens within your code. It's because it's better to identify that as early on as possible. And then after that, when your infrastructure is actually deployed, we'll do something called infrastructure as code. So at least you deploy your infrastructure as code. So here we have like templates. So you have templates that are probably hardened beforehand. So you're deploying that hardened template and making sure that all the configurations are set securely. We also do dynamic security scanning here because remember during the commit you have the application that is already hardened. So here, this one we did static application security testing. So we did the security test on a code that's static, that's not running. So when you come to deploy, you do dynamic security scanning on code that's already running. So you can have it running maybe in a staging environment. So you have a tool like something like OWASP to lab We'll cover some of these tools as well later on. So we'll cover something like dynamic security testing, like WhatsApp. We'll scan against your code that's already running. And then we go in and check cloud configuration checks. If you've actually set your cloud resources securely, you're making sure that you're not leaking, maybe, let's say, maybe you're not using port 22 that's actually open. And then we also do security acceptance tests to make sure that everything that you've deployed is actually set correctly. And then once you've deployed a secure application in a secure environment, we make sure that we're always monitoring to make sure that it always remains secure. So I mentioned that we have static and dynamic analysis. So during the commit and the deploy stage. So during the pre-commit, we have static analysis towards the commit stage, and then we do a dynamic analysis towards the deploy stage, and then we make sure that we have making sure that they are monitoring throughout. So the reason why we have to do this is to prevent common application security attacks, because we have the OWASP top 10, which I'll also cover after this, just to show you why we have to do all this automation in place. And with that, we'll go into how you can be able to now do that practically. So please, if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to plug in and we learn as we go. So today I have this particular repo that we're going to use. I'll add it on the chat. So I think I still can't access the chat.
Sorry about that. I think it's because you're considered a guest. Can we elevate your privileges? Let me see.
Yes, please.
Let me see. The only two options: make an attendee. That I'm sure is not the good one. Do we add you into the team? We should have done this before. Sorry about that. So let me just check if we can add you to the team. So the email is the one we've been communicating with, right? So let me see. Keith, you created the link under the Cyber Shujaa cohort 3. Are you able to add Joylynn?
Let me try.
So just add that to the team. So manage team. I'm also just trying to see whether this will change it. And then add member. Joylynn, please just give me your email again, if you don't mind.
Okay.
I need to check my emails.
Alternatively, let me just share this with Keith, and then he can share on chats.
Okay,
So Keith,
just email just now.
Just send that to the chat. So what I want us to do today, I want us to learn practically all those concepts that I've spoken about. I want us to do it practically. So I have this repo. So I deployed a vulnerable Python application here, and I have this PDF. So when you access that PDF, it will show you everything that you need to do today in a practical way. So I'll show you like an overall view of what we expect this to do. And then after I show you, we'll go in and each one of us will go in and do it individually. So remember, if you have any challenges, I'm here to help as well.
So Joylynn, that's github.com. That's an S2, capital S2.
Yes.
Capital
Capital
FRDQ.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so capital S2, capital FRD, capital Q / vuln with a capital V Django. So I think, guys, if you can just see that, you can, maybe it will be faster, especially those who are not in our Cyber Shujaa current group. You can quickly just take that because it has worked on my side. So I've added you, Joylynn. Hopefully that changes something. But if not, it's okay. We can still try and continue.
Okay. So I'll just show you an overview of what we've seen. Like so I mentioned all those threat factors that we actually look at. So this is just a global view of the threats that we actually see, like in the last 30 days. This is from Microsoft. So you'll see this is the top attacks that we actually are seeing right now, according to the various regions. So if you go in and see like what exactly that is all about. So the first attack here is whereby people are using cracked tools. I know many of us here are guilty of this. So you use cracked tools to like register into like some, like in our case, Microsoft software. So in your case, I've seen people using cracked tools, like even cracked bath suits, because you don't use the community version. And so when you use those cracked tools, you see like a window popping, and then you're wondering. So anytime that you want to use WebSuite, you see like a window pop, and you don't know what's actually being executed in the background. Or an example, like which video software do you actually use nowadays? You can just tell me on the chat, because you usually find this cracked tool, which tells you that yeah, you can see the latest movies that were released like last week. So using cracked tool, but you actually don't know what you're actually installing or introducing into your environment. So I'll give an example. So if you introduce this tool into your environment, and then it goes in and installs like even a spyware, you can install like a ransomware as well. So you're wondering the next time you can't access all your files, you can't access anything. So you'll find like a window there saying that you need to pay up to a particular Bitcoin account, or now you can't access everything just because you use a cracked tool. So just be responsible and pay up for genuine softwares whenever you want to use particular resources, because you don't know what you're actually introducing into your environment. So I'll show you some threat maps so you can understand what it actually takes, why we have to talk about security, why we have to talk about DevSecOps. And so this is by threat map, by checkpoints. So you can see all these. So this is sort of what we call the cyber warfare, because you can see it's sort of like you're targeting various countries. So an attack is coming from the US to Asia to Sri Lanka to every part of the world. And you can see what actually happens, like DNS enforcement violation. For sure, most of the attacks are usually based on DNS. Even when you talk about DDoS, you're talking about DNS as well. So you can imagine what happens. Like it's a lot of attacks that happen throughout. So in this day, you'll find 161 million attacks today alone. So let's look for Kaspersky. This is a real-time map as well. So you can see what happens. These are real-time attacks from all over the world. Yeah, you're right. It looks like attacks like yeah, being targeted all over. So, and then we also have this one by Radware. You can see in real time how many attacks are actually being targeted. So the top attacked are the US, India, Japan, but not to say that like Kenya, we're not being attacked, or Africa, we are. So if you see here, you'll be able to just go in and see the kind of attacks that are targeting specific countries. So the top attacks are top application attacks are access violations. So if you don't put in access control, yes, they will actually be violated. So I'll give an example, like broken access control. So if you don't set your access control in the proper way, someone will just go in and manipulate that as well and access your resources. So you have all kinds of injections. So injections are something like SQL injection, or even file injections as well. So you're able to upload malicious files, and then you're able to even do remote code execution because of injections as well. So data theft, exploits, cross-site scripting, those are the ones that are top of mind today. Is another one by Fortinet. You can see as well, it's sort of like actually like a cyber warfare. So that one is just show you to appreciate what happens in real time. So if you're covering DevSecOps, you have to understand the OWASP top 10. So the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities are usually reviewed every 4 years. So you see in 2017, they were very different from what you see in 2021. We have 3 new OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities being introduced in 2021. So you have to understand all this because remember, even in this Fortinet, on this Radware where we're talking about access violations, our top one is broken access control. So go in and understand what all this is all about. Broken access control, cryptographic failures, injection, insecure design. So if you don't take into account security when you're designing the whole architecture, you might miss a thing or two in terms of like what you call security in depth, or putting layers and layers of security to secure your whole environment. And then you have security misconfigurations. So you might think that you're actually using something securely, but in a way you are not, you've not set the security configurations securely. So go in as well and learn what security misconfiguration is all about. And then the sixth one is vulnerable and outdated components. So vulnerable and outdated components, remember we mentioned 80 to 90% of code that you actually borrow is open source or third-party components. So this is where we have vulnerable and outdated components, whereby you're introducing code into your environment if you're using out-of-date components. Because if you use out-of-date components, very sure that they will have security vulnerabilities. So here we have common vulnerability exposures. So that's what we call CVEs. So we have this CVE.org, which has a list of all the CVEs that are announced. So CVE is a list of, if I have like a security vulnerability released today, they'll give it like a name like CVE 2023, and it give you like a unique identifier for that particular vulnerability that you've actually found. And then we also have identification and authentication failures, software and data integrity failures, security logging and monitoring failures, and server-side request forgery. So this, I believe, Dr. Paula, we are taking into consideration, like actually training on each of these, because, or if we need another session to go into detail on each of these and how to how to secure, actually to fix each of these vulnerabilities, then you can have one. Okay.
Yeah. That would be good.
Okay, so as we mentioned earlier, we have all those stages of the software development life cycle. So part of that we covered during the commit. We have the SaaS tools. So today we're going to play around with Microsoft Defender for Cloud, because the Microsoft Defender for DevOps, which is part of the Microsoft Defender for Cloud, actually has like a unified solution for securing the DevOps. So like we are integrating several open source tools. Bandit is a SaaS tool, so it will go in and scan into your Python code and find security vulnerabilities. Build scheme will check your binaries, your Windows binaries for security vulnerabilities. ESLint will check your JavaScript code for security vulnerabilities, just like it will be like Bandit, but now Bandit is already for Python. CrudScan will go in and check if you have actually hard coded any credentials, and it will warn you if it finds any credentials. Template analyzer, remember we mentioned that you need to use like secure templates. So this one will go in and make sure that the templates that you're using are secure. And then TerraScan will go into and check into your infrastructure. Remember we mentioned infrastructure as code. It will go in and crawl through your infrastructure to make sure that you're using secure infrastructure. And then we'd use Trivy. So Trivy goes in and scans your containers for security vulnerabilities in your file systems and your Git repositories, and gives you an overall view of your security posture as well. So the good thing about Microsoft Defender for DevOps is that it does it for you as well. So you don't have to go in and deploy Bandit by yourself, build scheme, scan, everything here. But I would advise you to go in and play around with this as well. Part of what we will be doing here is you go in and install Bandit in your local terminal and try and play around with it to find if you find any security vulnerabilities within your code. So if you have Kali, that's good enough as well. Okay. So we'll do that practically as well. So you need to go in and install Bandit locally. I had done that previously, so make sure that you install Bandit locally. And then you run this code, this script, just to make sure that it goes in and finds security vulnerabilities within your Python code. And then it will give you all the security vulnerabilities. And one key thing that you need to know for application security, all the security vulnerabilities are given a severity. So it can either be critical, high, low, medium, or informative. So depending on the level of damage that can be done with that particular security vulnerability. So make sure you have your environments ready. If you have any challenges, we will do that practically as well. So we'll go in and make sure that we have Microsoft Defender for DevOps deployed in Azure DevOps. So I had done that earlier, but we'll do it as well. So all you have to do is to make sure that you go to the marketplace within Azure DevOps, and you search for the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find it. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then you will find the Microsoft Defender for DevOps. And then Security DevOps extension.
So that's marketplace.visualstudio.com.
Yes. So that one is part of it. You'll still find it under Azure DevOps. You're under your organization. So when you click on it, it will take you to the marketplace. So the marketplace has very many security tools. So you can see all these tools that are actually built in. So once you install, like if you want to install like Snake, you just click on it and then you say get it for free. And then you choose which organization you want to deploy that one in. So in my case, I already have it installed. So all you have to do is to choose your organization and then say install. So you can see we have very many security tools in place. So for container security, Aqua, so we mentioned Trivi. So Trivi is actually owned by Aqua. I can see here it's by. Go in. So you can go in and play around with the various tools that are available. So in today's case, we'll be using the Microsoft Defender for DevOps because it has a suite of everything that you need. Click on it, and then you say get it for free. And then you make sure that you choose your organization, and then you say install. So as of now, I have that already there. So part of the task that you'll be doing is you make sure that you have installed this vulnerable code. Make sure that you've installed it from my repo, you fork my repo into your GitHub repo, and then you also into Azure DevOps. And then now you do the SaaS scan using Bandit locally, just to appreciate the extent of what Bandit does, how it actually finds the security vulnerabilities. And then now you go into Azure DevOps and you configure the Microsoft Security DevOps extension. And then you create a pipeline for that particular security scan. And then once the pipeline has run, it will give you the security vulnerabilities. And then after that, you can do the same in your GitHub Actions, whereby you deploy the Microsoft Security DevOps within your GitHub Actions. And then after that, it will go in and crawl through your repo and find security vulnerabilities. And you'll be able to find it within your scan review.
So Joylynn,
So,
I take it that's the lab we're gonna do, right? You're gonna
yes.
guide us? Okay.
Yes.
Right.
So I'll just guide you briefly right now, but I want us all to do it practically. And then now, whenever you have like a challenge, you just raise your hand, and then we address if you have any challenges. So I'll give a brief example. Like when you go into the into your repo. So the way you deploy these various security tools, you have to deploy it in GitHub Actions, sort of like our workflow. So when you go to Actions, so if you don't see Actions by default, you have to go to Settings, and you go to, I believe, Environment. You have to go in and make sure that Actions is actually allowed. So at least it can appear here. So when you go to Actions, you can be able to set up a new workflow. So there are various, just the same way we saw here in the marketplace. It is also a marketplace for GitHub, whereby you can be able to add the various tasks. So since we're playing around with Bandit today, I want us to see if we have a workflow for Bandit. So let's search for that. Yes, so there's a workflow for Bandit Scan. So let's just see. So Bandit is a free software designed to find common security issues in Python code. So all you have to do is to click configure. So what that does, it will add a YAML file into your workflow, and then you have to commit it. So once you commit it, it will go in and start the pipeline. So let's just briefly go through this. So the name of the job will be Bandit, and then it will be crawling through your branch that you the main branch. So if your branch is another one, like it's not main, just rename it to the branch that you want to be scanned. And then it goes in and checks out the code, and then it runs on a particular agent using like Ubuntu latest. And then it will crawl into your code and gives you the security vulnerability. So once you do that, you say start commit, and then you commit the file. Once you do that, you can go in back to actions, and then you will see that it's created a workflow to create that particular file. So when you click on that particular task, you'll see what exactly is happening on the background. And the job is actually complete. So it sets up the job. The operating system, remember, it was using Ubuntu latest. So go in and just see what actually happens in the background. So it checks it out, the code, and then it installs the Bandit. It pip install Bandit, and then it runs it against your code, and then it uploads the findings. So after you've done that, when you go to security, you make sure that you have make sure that you have security advisories enabled, and you have like code scanning alerts enabled. So remember, Bandit is a code scanner. So once you have code scanning enabled, it will give you security vulnerabilities that are found by Bandit. So how do you know that it's actually found by Bandit? So you go to security scanning. This number highlights the number of security vulnerabilities that are found within your code, and you know that it was detected by Bandit. Okay. So again, you can create a new workflow, and then you can set up a workflow yourself. And then you add your own job, your own tasks here. So that's what you're going to do with Defender for DevOps as well during the lab. And once you put in the code that's provided, you just start commit, and then the job starts running, and it will give you the security vulnerabilities. As simple as that. So that's on the GitHub Actions side. And then when you go to Azure DevOps, as we've said, we make sure that you have the extension installed from the marketplace. And then once you have that installed, you go to pipelines, and then you can say new pipeline. And once you have imported the code into your Azure DevOps, the code will sit in the Azure repos. So you choose your vulnerable code, the repo itself, and then you say that you want to use like a startup pipeline. So if you have an existing YAML file, you can upload that as well. But in this case, we'll just use a startup pipeline. So a startup pipeline is just simple. So you can see it's just using the main branch, and then we're using the latest Ubuntu latest VM image. So what I want us to do is once you have that particular task, once you have that extension installed, you can be able to borrow in to import that task into your pipeline. So all you have to do is to go to the show assistant, and then you search for the Microsoft. Okay, I'll give an example. So we had installed the Sneak one first of all. So when you go to Sneak, you can just click on that, and then you make sure that you have your API token installed and everything there. So, but we're not using Sneak today, so just make sure that you just search for Microsoft Security DevOps. So let's just mute this. So make sure that you have the Microsoft Security DevOps extension, and then you import the task. So we can leave it as is, and then just say add. And then you say save and run. And then you say save and run. Okay. Okay, that surely happens. So we'll just troubleshoot that as we go along as well. So what happens is, so once you have the pipeline running, and it is successfully run, when you go to that particular pipeline and you go to scan, it will give you all the security vulnerabilities here. So I'll repeat, remember, in this case, we are covering 6 different open source tools. So it will deploy all those different open source tools into that particular task called the Microsoft Security DevOps task. And then it will give you the security vulnerabilities. So in this case,
Joylynn, I can tell you for sure, people are first of all watching to see what you're doing. And then I hope you'll take us a bit slower on that. Okay. Yeah, I think even just assuming that guys have forked the code and imported their repo, I don't think many people are there yet. And then we'll also check. Okay.
Yeah, that's why we'll have like 1 full hour of all of us just doing it ourselves.
All
like
right.
From
Super.
the top of the hour, from 10.
Yes. Yeah.
We'll take time individually just to do it ourselves. Like if each one of us has any challenge, you let me know. But the walkthrough that I shared should have everything that you need.
Okay. Does Keith have the walkthrough? Keith, you have the walkthrough?
It's part of the repo that I shared earlier.
It's part of the
Yeah, it's part of the link. I've already shared.
Yeah.
Oh, it has a PDF, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
So part of the task that will be done is to check for software, secure software. So we have the security development lifecycle, the SDL. So this one just has an overall view of what developers should be able to do to make sure that your code is secure. So when you check on the best practices, It gives you like an overall view of what you have to do. Like, remember we mentioned about static application analysis, security testing, dynamic, dust, penetration testing, using approved tools. This is where we're talking about cracked tools as well. So it goes in and checks that your code actually adheres to the security development best practices. And then it will also go in and check for, remember one of the tools is CredScan. So if you have hard quality credentials, it will give you an overall view of all the security vulnerabilities. And then remember TerraScan goes in and checks for security vulnerabilities within your infrastructure. So this one found that you have to ensure that when installing packages, you should have this particular flag set. So you go in back into your Docker file and you make sure that this is actually configured. And then I didn't find anything on Bandit and template analyzer and Trivi, but it gives you an overall view of what the tool actually does. Okay. So after we've done that, what you want to do next is for you to go into your Azure portal and you go into Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So the thing with Defender for DevOps, it doesn't matter where your code sits, because when you go to environment settings, you can be able to add your particular environment. So if your code is sitting in like Amazon Web Services or GCP or GitHub or Azure DevOps, you can go in and add all those environments. So at least you can have an overall view of the security posture of all your repos. So and then after you've done that, we will go to the workbooks. So we've created a workbook called DevOps Security. So this DevOps Security will give you a bird's eye view of your security posture of all those environments. So if you want to see the secrets exposed in all your repos, you'd go to this security tab, and then it will give you everything there. And then if you want to see the security vulnerabilities that are within your code, it's also part of this. And then if you want to see the open source vulnerabilities, there's also that. Infrastructure code vulnerabilities, it's also there. And the overall security posture, and it's there as well. So I think that's just an overall view of DevSecOps. Like, remember the primary thing that we talk about is a culture shift, is for you to incorporate security early on during your even security discussions with the development team, and putting security best practices, educating the developers and security teams and everyone around the security best practices. So with that, we will go in and start the walkthrough. So you spend 1 hour on this. So if you have any challenges around this, like you can just let me know, and then we'll walk through that as well. Okay.
Awesome. So I hope it's very clear that we're doing for 1 hour lab. How do you get the lab? The lab, you can see the link on Joylynn's screen. Unfortunately, not everyone has access to the chat. So it's just on github.com, capital S, 2, capital F, small RD, capital Q, / Vuln Django, with a capital V for VULN, and Django DJANGO with a capital D. If you just get to that link, you'll get to access the repo. And one of the files, so once you're on that, you can actually fork to your GitHub account, which I hope you all have. So you know your Azure account and your GitHub account can be linked. So hopefully you did that. We mentioned that earlier. But one of the files there is capital MS _ appinnovation.pdf. So that's the one which has all the steps that you can see Joylynn showing there. Yeah. Nobody is muted. You can unmute yourself. If you want to raise your hand, you can raise your hand. So in case you have any issues, this is when you need to say something, then I think we can begin. Thank you, Joylynn. This is amazing. And I don't know if there are people who have any questions for the first half of the talk. You can also ask. All right, I think then it's clear. So Joylynn, I think that's good. So do you want guys just to be on the call and just to work? Do we do it in groups?
But you can also do it in groups, if that's even better. And then you can invite me in the groups and we can work alongside each other. So just a summary, so at least we can all appreciate what DevSecOps is. As we mentioned earlier, what we want to do with DevSecOps is to identify security vulnerabilities as early on as possible. Okay, and truth be told, it's not as easy as it is like this, because when you go into your infrastructure as code. So what I want us to do, when you identify a security vulnerability, maybe using Bandit, try and go in and fix that security vulnerability. Go and see what solutions there are to identify or to fix this particular security vulnerability. And then once you've done that, you can scan again using Bandit to see if that security vulnerability has been closed. Okay. So if it's on dependency management or software composition analysis, which you are talking about third-party components or open source components, so here you'll find it's mainly because of outdated components or outdated versions of components that you're using. So you can go in and try and update the versions and see if you do a rerun, if it will actually close that particular security vulnerability. So I want us to go in and understand each and every step that we're doing here. And if it's infrastructure as code, remember that Docker file, we want to go in and set that particular flag. And then after you set that particular flag on Docker file, we run the scan as well using TerraScan to see if it has actually fixed. For dynamic security scanning, I would encourage you to go in and get OWASP Zap later on and just try and play around with this.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, we can start our class, our practicals.
Okay.
So I believe we can stop recording and then we can just have discussion.
That's okay. That's good. Keith, I'm not an organizer of the meeting unless you make me one, because what we'd need to do is make some breakout rooms. So we are 100 with the exclusion of the 3 of us. I also see Byron is on the call. So I think we can say maybe in groups of 10. So we can just randomly assign 10 rooms with 10 people. I think it will be easier than people working individually.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, organically, then the teamwork and collaboration can also work.
Okay, so I can make the rooms, but I cannot make you I can only make you an attendee. I don't know if
It's
that's
okay then.
settings.
So do the 10 rooms, the 10
Okay.
rooms of 10.
Okay.
And you can do a random assignment instead of guys choosing.
Okay.
So that guys can be pushed out to the rooms. So thank you so much, Joylynn. I think that was a great overview of DevSecOps. I'm not seeing any questions, even as the rooms are being made. Any questions? Guys, you're quiet.
So I think maybe the questions will come in after
the
start.
practicals.
Yeah, but there should be questions like maybe what is the day like as a DevSecOps engineer, or how much are they paid?
Yeah, like guys are quiet. I'm even like wondering what kind of group I have with me. Like no one has said anything since we began. Guys, come on. Yes,
Hello. Hi,
Good
Joylynn. Hi,
morning.
everyone. It's a great thing. I think I just joined in like about 30 minutes into the session. And now that someone hasn't spoken, we can just break that bottom and just say cheers to Joylynn, and how you've broken down everything. I know 2 hours is never enough, but at least for some starters, at least to launch into it and spike in some interest to people. That was a good session. I think it's just a way of just commending the session and the moderation from your other colleague. And as we look forward, at least to get our hands dirty to see how the platform looks like, or maybe to ask, maybe you can tell us how much do they pay for DevSecOps?
Okay, let me just
What's
say,
the standard in Kenya?
so it depends, but what I've seen, one of the on-demand skills that's actually like right now is cloud security engineers. So you're not going wrong by choosing a path in cloud security for sure. So pick a path and master it end to end, like master the craft, and you won't go wrong for sure. So thank you, Victor, for that. So maybe what you can do, Dr. Musuva, at 10:50, we can all convene back.
Yes.
So if we have any questions from our various breakout rooms, we can come in back and answer those questions.
Okay, that sounds good. And then we can also rotate in the different rooms and see people's experiences. Keith, are the rooms up?
Yes, I'm just waiting so that I can open them.
So just open them. I think we've agreed. Because we only have like because 10 minutes already gone by the time guys settle in. So we want them to spend as much time doing the exercise.
Okay.
So just randomize and just push guys to the rooms.
And please take this exercise very seriously and participate in your teams as well.
Yeah. Okay, so I can see the rooms are open. Guys are